How's it going, Andrew?
What's going on, Matt?
Yeah, same old, same old.
Same old.
You want to know something crazy? I'm sure this will actually apply even as much younger as you are than I am.
So much younger.
Significantly. What, you got like 7, 8 years on me?
Yeah, I think so. I'm 33.
Yeah, so 9 years.
Yeah, even more than you thought.
Right. So, blanket forts for kids are no longer like they were for us. I'm sure you just like use the furniture and stuff, right?
So right now I have like these like cushion kit thing that has like holes for windows and stuff that I
know,
stack.
but I mean when you were a kid.
When I was a kid, I'd build it out of chairs and cushions and things.
So Olivia's aunt and her husband got this thing for Zoe a while back, and we've used it before, but I've never really messed with it. It's just like little
Connecty
hexagonal
things, yeah.
balls with holes all over them, and then poles. It's almost like, you know,
A skeleton you're building.
right, yeah, exactly. And then throwing the blankets over the top of it. And I was like, man, we could have done so much cool stuff with these when I was a kid.
Dude, when I was a kid, I'd go to my grandparents' house, and they would relegate us to the basement, and we would destroy that place. We would take everything we'd find, and we built, like, there's a little, I'd say there's an alcove about the size of this room. We would fill the whole thing, and this size of this room would be one massive fort that would have, like, various passageways.
Right. But
and
you used, like, furniture or whatever you had around to do it. You didn't get this cool thing you could just, like, build a structure with.
Like a piano and some chairs and some all this other stuff. But it got so bad that they would try to get us to go to church, and they couldn't get us out because they couldn't get in because it was too much of a mess. We were just like in the back recesses, just like, no, we're not coming out of the fort.
Yeah, that's fun. That's fun. All right. Well, enough chit chat. We should get to our guest.
All right, I'll play the music.
Loosen up your ties and roll up your sleeves. It's time for fellowship with Matt and Andrew. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are not necessarily the views and opinions of the Grand Lodge of Wisconsin or any other Grand Lodge or any appended body.
All right.
Today with us, we have a very special guest. We have Worshipful Brother Todd Whaley, one of the hosts of That Other Masonic Podcast, who I know people have heard me talk about on the podcast before. Thanks for coming on, Todd.
Hey, thanks for having me, fellas. I appreciate it.
So, Todd, for our listeners, can you give us a brief introduction of your backstory? What's your deal?
Well, my name is Todd Whaley. I'm a 4-time past master of Austin 128 in Tipton, Indiana. And now I serve Bethlehem Lodge 574 in Birdseye, Indiana as a junior warden. And I guess I'm a chief bottle washer, cook, lodge construction guy. I do everything I can do to help out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also past monarch of Ibis Grotto, and I joined New York Rite Disguise Rite also, but I'm not active in one of those.
So, Todd, just the basic classic Mason kickoff question. What brought you to Freemasonry, and what keeps you here?
Well, what brought me is my dad was a Mason, my grandfather on my mom's side was a Mason, and my great-grandfather was a Mason also. And I always knew about Masonry growing up. Dad was never active in it because he always worked midnights or second shift, so he's never active in it. But when my grandpa passed away at his Masonic service, he had over 100 Masons stand up his Masonic service there in Missouri. And that really impressed me a lot. And the caliber of guys that came and stood up for him, and he was laying there in the casket and everything, really impressed on me. And I got back to Indiana. I told my dad, hey, I want to join Lodge. And he was okay. He needs some guys there at the local lodge in town, and he got me petitioned. And I was off the races. I fell in love with it. The ritual, the camaraderie, the fellowship, just everything. I fell in love with it right away, and I don't think I've missed a single meeting in 5.5 years. Mm-hmm. I went to every degree I could. It gave me that purpose that I had that I lost from playing sports.
Sure.
It gave me something to work for, to get better at, and it gave me that same kind of fellowship, I think.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense. I think comparing it to sports is actually a good thing because it kind of is a team sport in its own way.
Right.
What would you say? So you and your co-host Jared started this podcast. So why did you join this appendant body? I like to call these podcasts a new appendant body that you create for yourself.
Well, I always liked podcasts, as far as like the Joe Rogans and the Adam Carolla. Like I liked them, but after I moved down here to Southern, where I'm at now, I really didn't know a whole lot of Masons. So that's kind of where I got my masonry from podcasts and other social medias also. And then once I finally joined the lodge, I was kind of wanting to start one of my own, but I didn't know how. I'm not really a technology kind of guy, but Jared mentioned that he had podcast equipment. And I go, oh, really? He said, you want to start a Masonic podcast? And he looked at me and said, no one listens to Masonic podcast. I go, sure they do. I said, I named off 3 or 4 of them, the average freshman. This was even before you guys even got started.
Yep.
But, the Traveling Man and the Whitey Stairs, the 3 Knocks and the Working Tool guys, stuff like that. I named off all them guys. He goes, oh, yeah. He said, oh, let me think about it. He dropped by the house one day. He goes, you want to try to make this work? I was like, yeah, I want to try to make it work. And he kind of told me everything, as far as financially, what goes into it, which isn't a whole lot, really. I mean, I forget what we pay a month, but it's really not that much. I said, the only thing is we have to be consistent on this. We have to do it we have to put an episode out every single week. He's like, oh, we go every 2 weeks. I said, no, you got to do it every week to get fresh in your mind. And we argued back and forth on that. And we kind of, figured out what our system is and everything. And basically, I wanted to do it because I wanted to put my ideas out there. I wanted to talk to other guys and share ideas. And I wanted to not so much become well known as we become more well versed in Freemasonry. And like they say in our ritual, to converse with well-informed Masons is the way to learn, and that's what I want to do.
Yeah, and I've also found that having, we do ours weekly too, and being forced to think of stuff to talk about every week has forced me to learn a lot more about Masonry, because you're like, you gotta be sharp, you gotta have something, and then the conversations themselves help as well. I have hiccups.
There you go, the hiccups. So I've always been curious, and I've listened to every episode of your guys' show, and I'm not sure if you guys have ever mentioned it or not. Why did you end up deciding on the name That Other Masonic Podcast?
That's a funny story about that. I was at work one day, and I'm an engine machinist, basically a diesel engine machinist, and Jared's got me a text of all these names, and they're like, hoodwinked in darkness or bringing the light. I mean, all these kind of like esoteric names, stuff like that. And I looked at them, and I was sitting there thinking, working. I'm thinking, man, what's a good catchy name that is people are gonna remember it? I mean, we could do the Traveling Man or this, that, and the other, and the sun rises in the east or whatever. And I thought, I thought about the best damn sports show, period. I thought that's a simple name. Everybody remembers that show. It was a great show. I said, well, what about That Other Masonic Podcast? Because we're not That Masonic Podcast. We're the Other Masonic Podcast.
Right.
And we argued about that for 2 weeks. No, we're not going to. No, we got to come up with something better. We got to come up with something better. No, that's the name. I said, we can spin that 100 different ways. And by our first episode we recorded, he goes, well, I guess we're going with That Other Masonic Podcast. I go, I guess so, and leave it off ever since.
Right on. I love it. How long have you guys been doing the show now? I know you guys got to be around 4 years? It's got to be 3.
It's been 3 or 4 years. I think it's been at least 3 years now, because we haven't got to 100 episodes yet. So it's got to be 2.5, 3 years. We started that right New Year's Day, or January 2nd, 2003, I think. We did 3 episodes, and they were so god awful. I told them to delete them. they weren't good at all. And he goes, no, they'll be fine. I'll edit them and I'll make them sound good. I was like, I don't know, dude. I think this thing's awful. The stuff we were talking about was we really didn't know what we were talking about. We were just talking, and I think we gotta get more well versed in this stuff and figure out our opinions right on, because we switch opinions 3 or 4 times back and forth with them on subjects and everything. Luckily, Jared accidentally he went to publish them, and he hit delete instead.
Oh, jeez.
So he deleted our first 3 episodes. I'm like, thank God he deleted those 3 episodes, because they were awful. And then I got busy with softball with my daughter. I was coaching the softball team at the time, and that was every single night for a while. And then we got back together, and after that, it really started going good. We started getting together once a month and doing 4 or 5 episodes, and actually planning what the episodes were going to be. And we got guests in there, and then after that, it become fairly normalized. I'm not going to say easy, but we become so normalized that now we kind of roll the punches on a lot better.
Right. And I think that's actually like a natural evolution of podcasting. It seems like once you kind of get used to the idea of being around a microphone and letting your guard down a little bit, those nerves get a little bit better, and then you can just kind of roll with stuff after a while and just figure out what you're going to say, even if you don't know what you're going to say.
Yeah, and eventually you start to kind of figure out like how you like to structure your episodes, which then helps you kind of plug and play where you're like, all right, I know kind of how we're going to go through this. I know what we're going to talk about, and that can be helpful too.
A lot of times I'll be talking and I'll be going real well. And you guys have heard this on our podcast before, but Jared's really good about interrupting me. And we were at our Founders Day celebration every year at the Sky Stripe for a Grand Lodge. And the first year we were up there, the guys who had heard us the little amount of time we were going so far on that. But I love how you guys do that thing where Jerry interrupts you all the time once you get talking. And I look at him and go, so that's not playing. He really interrupts me. While I have a good thought going, he'll stop right and go ask me a question that doesn't even pertain to what I'm talking about.
Right.
And you'll hear me all the time. I give out his time, go, yeah, I'm what, Jared? But like you said when we first started, is we don't want it to be like, we're going to hit you with education. We want to, everything just make you think about it. We want you to have basically we want you to be sitting there listening to our conversation.
Yep.
Right.
Like you're sitting in a room with them. Yep. We didn't want it to be so structured that, okay, this episode we're doing, or this part of this episode we do this part of the episode we do that. We just start talking, and if the subject matter goes one way, we go with it. If it goes another way, we go that way. If a rabbit hole pops up, we go down that rabbit hole too. So
yep, and that's how we don't
try to keep it on a straight line. Yeah, I love you guys' this show, really.
You know what's funny?
Thank you.
You know what's funny is that when, like, we just recorded an episode before this. We were like, we're going to talk about this, and then the rabbit hole became the episode. We were like, wait, we're not talking about what we came to talk about at all.
I mean, we were slightly on topic. It just veered in different directions that could affect that topic. But yeah, I mean, that's part of the fun, though, right? I think I'd be much more nervous trying to sit down and do an episode with Andrew if we had like almost scripted out what we were going to say beforehand, because then what if I don't remember it right? What if I say the right thing or wrong thing, whatever,
Right.
It's just more fun to just let it be natural.
Yeah. And we don't write any questions down before we start the episode. We have our basic, questions we always start out with, like, got you interested in masonry, why kept you coming back, blah, 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 stuff like that.
Right.
But as far as anything between that to our last question we always ask, we have nothing written down at all. There is no notes in front of us. What we usually have in front of us is a spit cup, a Diet Mountain Dew, and a microphone. That's all we have in front of us.
Right.
So we'll sit there and, it's like, I just want to have that conversation. I don't want to interview the guy. I just want to talk to him.
Right, exactly.
Brother, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and eventually, even though you got to start out with a few questions in the beginning, you can, usually with other brothers, you can make that conversation just kind of turn into a natural back and forth, once you kind of feel each other out and stuff like that. And you guys have also done very well pulling from the community of Masonic TikTokers who we've all had extensive interactions with. So then when you get them on the episode, it almost makes it already a natural conversation because you've had these conversations with people before there.
Yeah, because all you crazy TikTokers sitting on your lives all the time and then me creeping on them.
I haven't gone on a TikTok live in so long.
Well, and the thing about it is, we were all on TikTok so big there for a while. Jared was like, we're like 6 hours a day having these lives. And Jared got burned out on it. But there's a lot more drama behind the scenes on a MasonTok than what people know, and it really upsets me that there is a certain jealousy, I think, amongst brothers sometimes. And I'm not sure that it's jealousy or if it's just someone doesn't think someone needs to be saying this, that, and the other. And I'm not going to talk about it anymore on here, but
right.
The little stuff on there, and there's so many people on there that are Cowans or clandestine and stuff like that, and all they want to do is argue with us. And I didn't go on. The only reason I went on MasonTok is because I wanted more masonry.
Yep.
I want to be able to converse with guys from other areas with different ideas, and to help my journey, my lodge out, my state out with new ideas, stuff like that. That's the only reason I went on there. I didn't go on there to, become great friends with everybody. I just wanted to go on there to have more Freemasons.
Right.
Yeah, no,
I don't get enough. I don't get enough.
I was in a similar boat where I was very stoked about Masonic TikTok, and then after Masonic TikTok decided to eat itself, I was like, and like how you said, you mentioned like, you don't even know the drama behind the scenes. Yes, I do, because they posted it publicly and I had to freaking watch it. And then I was like, you know what? And then I blocked everybody. I don't follow any Masonic TikToks anymore, really, besides like you. Basically, I'll see your stuff and some of the other guys. I'm very selective on what Masons I follow on TikTok now, because it was
I basically came out. I basically came out with all that happens. Listen, the people who are starting that drama, I'm not a big fan of them anyway. So I'm not reposting their stuff because I'm not interested in what they're putting out there. Like as far as like Fluff or Crash Dog or Webmaster or even like, some other guys on TikTok, like My Freemason, guys like that. My Freemason, I believe, out of Wisconsin.
Yep.
I like their stuff. It's basically, they're just telling stories of Freemasonry. They're not getting all esoterics and everything. And I can talk esoterics all night long, but it's not my favorite thing to talk about.
Sure.
I'd rather talk about just Freemasonry in general and everything, the philosophy that way. But yeah, I really kind of stepped away from the MasonTok so much. If Fluff comes on, I'll talk to him. If my buddy Meat Cutter's on there all the time, I'll talk to him. But he usually doesn't want to talk too much Freemasonry because of all the trolls.
Yep.
They come in there and want to call fake worshipers and baby killers and everything else. I'd rather not even talk to people like that.
Well, you guys just had Fluff on, didn't you?
Yeah, he was our season finale. We had him on. We've been trying to get him on for a while. It just never worked out. And then told Jared for our season finale, I want to get Fluff on there. And he's like, yeah, I think enough time's passed and all the drama's gone away. We'll be okay. I said, well, we're going to have him on regardless because he's coming on. And but we had a really good conversation. I mean, when you talk to a guy about Freemasonry, you can tell he is 100% invested in Freemasonry.
Yeah.
I mean, for one, he's probably got one of the best, best Christian souls I've ever talked to over the phone, of course. But listen to the guy. I don't know the front. Never got a person or anything. But when I talk to him and listen to him, I believe him.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And there's not very many people online when I hear him talk that I believe 100%.
Sure.
And there's just some stuff he says that I'm like, that might be a little. I think you might be looking at it the wrong way, but I am one of the older Masons on MasonTok too. I mean, I'm a 23-year Mason, where most guys have been in 6, 7, 8, maybe 10 years. Mm-hmm. So I've kind of been around the circle more than most of the guys on MasonTok have.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing is like what people wanted to use TikTok for, which is they wanted to form these impromptu chat spaces to hang out with brothers around the world. I think where the problem started is they were treating them like their private chat rooms, but then they're just in the world. Yeah. And I think the only reason that happened is because so many people were on TikTok. That was the first, like, cross the border, universal, everyone had it. Whereas really what they were looking for is something like Discord, like we're sitting on now, where you could hop into something like this, pull up a bunch of videos, and then just hang out with brothers. So I think really in that way, it's good in the way that Masons are investing in new ways to use tech, right? But in the less good way, it's like they didn't know how to use it correctly, if that makes sense.
Right. Well, and I think egos started to get involved as well when it came to follower accounts and stuff like that. And,
But yeah, I mean,
guys are making money. Guys are making money off of it. It's not, they say, well, I'm not making money off Freemasonry. No, but, you get all these gifts and everything, and some of those gifts add up pretty quick. I mean, last night I was on for half hour, I made 50 cents.
Yep.
I mean, I don't cash money. I use money to buy more gifts for everybody else. I never put any money in TikTok. But, guys were getting mad because guys were getting all these, followers and get all these gifts, and they were making some, enough probably buy gas with for a week or something like that. But good for them. They're putting their time and effort into it. Why shouldn't they get paid for it somehow, But, I think a lot of it was jealousy. A lot of guys their philosophies weren't the same as most people's. And I think guys were getting called out on some of their philosophies that they really didn't understand. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, right now I'm going back and relearning everything about Freemasonry now. So,
well, not to shift us away from the TikTok drama, but I did have an interesting question I've been thinking about. So in our last episode that'll release before this one, we were talking about the importance of taking pride in your lodge. What would you say you're most proud of about your lodge?
Well, this lodge we're at now, we're kind of rebuilding here at Bethlehem Lodge in the Bird's Eye. And it's a very small lodge. It's in a very small town, like 400 people on the edge of the county. Yeah, I guess you can call it the edge of the county. And we're trying to change the culture where we're doing more activities in the community and everything. I'm really proud about how some of these old guys have not old guys, but guys who are already there, our senior members, we call them that, and how they kind of stepped up and took some of our ideas that, since the young guys are at work here, but these retired guys have kind of helped us out there today. And I'm really proud of what those guys have done. They have changed the way they thought about fundraising and marketing and stuff like that to kind of see a new way of doing it. We're starting to kind of see our way of doing that now and doing it every day. But one thing I'm really proud of my home lodge in Tipton, Austin Lodge, which one in Tipton is. When I first joined that lodge, we had over 200 something members, and they had repeated past masters for like 5-6 years. And they finally had a new guy coming through and everything, but he lived about an hour away from the lodge and everything, so he wasn't able to be there a lot. He had a busy life, but his dad belonged there, so he's going to be master there. Well, as I got through the chairs, I went through the chairs really fast. I went from the senior steward, senior deacon, junior warden, down to master for 4 years. Mm-hmm. But in those 4 or 5 years I was in the big chairs, I call it, is we started going out to the festivals, like the 4-H festival and the little festival we have in town called the Pork Festival, because it used to be a big pork producing area down that area. Not anymore, though, but it's got a pork festival. And we did the information booths, basically, just get out information about Freemasonry. Well, then we started giving out free bottles of water during the hottest days of the summer, during these festivals and everything. Well, we started getting a lot of new members off of doing that. Well, by the time I got done with my 4th year of being master, we had no past masters in line, second line, except for our treasurer and
secretary.
Now, the secretary wasn't a past master type, but the Tyler was a past master.
Sure.
He's the old guy who wanted to stay outside the lodge. We're like, fine, take it. But we had all new guys in there, and I moved away in 2011 to I had my wife's hometown here, Southern Indiana. But since then, they have started up a gigantic and very well-funded scholarship fund, where they give away like 2 very high-priced scholarships every year. They have a golf tournament. They have a bowling tournament every year. 2 years ago, they got the number 2 lodge in the state as far as the Grand Masters Award goes.
Oh.
And I had no involvement at all since after 2010. Yeah, 2010 I was monarch of the grotto, so I really wasn't involved in my lodge as much as I should have been. But that lodge, they had kind of taken what me and some of the newer guys back then did, and they ran with it, and they have made that lodge. Every time I go back, I'm amazed how many guys show up for a stated meeting. We don't have 25, 30 guys show up for a stated meeting now. Where used to, we were looking at a quorum. Mm-hmm. And that's probably the proudest thing both things I'm proud of in Masonry is I was able to be there when that got started. And I was able to at least get people in there who kept the ball rolling. But other than that, I had nothing to do with it. But I'm just so proud of the fact those guys, what they did to change the culture of that lodge and make it what it is today.
That's awesome. And I know when you were a relatively new Mason, you decided you were going to be a well-traveled man, if I remember correctly, and you were always going out and visiting all these lodges. Would you say that your travels helped you with being able to kind of start the ball rolling on changing the culture at that lodge? Yeah,
you would some of these lodges who were a lot smaller enough, they had much more activity than what we did. And it's like, okay, what are they doing that we're not? And, it was right there where you got Tiffany County, they have Hamilton County to the south, which is where like Carmel, Westfield, Fishers, all like the fastest growing towns in the country are right there. Then you had Howard County, which was where you had all your big Chrysler plants, and Delco's world headquarters used to be in Howard County. Now, I don't know. I think they're out of business now, for all I know. But you had all these lodges up there, and you saw the ones that were thriving lodges, and you saw the ones that were going downhill. And so you kind of saw what was working and what wasn't working just by traveling around all these different lodges. And so you kind of stole from the best, and you erased from the worst ones of it, and it kind of helped out that way. I mean, it kind of gave me a better see of, hey, here's what works in this area, here's what doesn't work in this area. Because, as you know, small town areas, it's very culture's class sometimes. Mm-hmm. I'm sure it's the same way in Wisconsin in a way. Where, they wouldn't do that here. They ain't going to do that there. But You kind of have to ease them into it, I guess.
Well, and there's something interesting where, like, I don't think there's a set blueprint that's going to work everywhere all the time. So if I took what we're doing here and went out to, a lodge up in the North Woods, said we're just going to do exactly what we do and it's going to work, it wouldn't work the same way.
Nope.
But the commonality between all of them is, one, you have to be doing something. But how that translates depends on the local culture of that area. What do people like to do in that area and stuff like that. But I think the common trend, and we were just kind of talking about this in the last episode, is being good at ritual. I think across the board, everyone benefits from that. Mm-hmm. And being active and taking members of the lodge's ideas and, really learning to grow as a group, not as just, 3 officers who are like, I guess we'll just do what we did back forever till we die.
Right. Or 3 people putting all the work on their shoulders.
Yeah, that happens a lot. I think the biggest thing is, I know, especially my home lodge, which I call also like my home lodge, is our biggest thing there is I told my officers, my first team master, I'm like, listen, if you guys want to take part in the degree, tell me before everybody else shows up. Because if you don't, I'm going to give your job away. Because I've always thought that Masons are supposed to travel to work. So if a guy's been working on a degree, working on a certain part, he's from another lodge, and he comes to our lodge and he wants to do that work, but, oh no, my officer is going to do that. Well, that guy's probably not going to come back to my lodge. I'm probably never going to be able to become friends with him. He's never going to, talk good about our lodge, or he may not, a friend of his who might live in my town, he wants to join Masonry, he'll take him with him and just send him to our lodge, So my thing always with our lodge is let the visitors do the work, because they know the work. If they're coming there, they ask to do the work, they're going to do a good job at it.
Right.
If they don't, we're getting held up after the degree. But that's all good fun.
Right.
And so I think a lot of my guys, I tell them, if you want to do that ritual, let me know. But if not, I'm going to give your job away to somebody who wants to do it but don't have the degree work to do it.
And I know I've mentioned,
I think that helps our lodge a lot.
Right. And I know I've mentioned that I had heard that before on your guys' podcast. And I find that to be super fascinating, because we don't have that sort of
travel to do work
culture. Yeah. It's more so if you're asked by another lodge to come help them, because they don't have somebody to do it. But I love the idea of that, traveling to go do work.
I'm very fascinated by it because, it makes sense, within the allegory of, what a craftsman does, right? So I think it makes a lot of sense, which is cool. But I also, we recently had, just the other day, a brother of ours who we inherited through a merger, Frank McKenna. We don't see him ever. And I guess he had reached out to the Master Lodge. He's like, I really want to do the Dewdrop lecture at your next fellowcraft degree. And I was like, heck yeah, let's do it. So it almost makes sense to be the officers are the default position. The officers are entitled, if no one else comes forward, they will do the work, right? Mm-hmm. But we already have a lot on our shoulders anyway. So what's the harm with somebody who comes to visit, hey, I kick butt at this part, I'd really love to do it, and being like, all right, have at her. We still made sure we had our bases covered, but if you want it, have it. Right. I think it's cool.
I like it.
It wasn't nothing. The biggest thing around, the Central Indiana part, where you had a lot of travelers, because they knew some lodges needed the help. Usually you have, most lodges in Indiana usually have one guy who can do all the second, third lectures, or one guy who can do the stair lecture, stuff like that. But, that's a big travel thing for us. But some guys who just become Master Masons, they want to do that work lecture. Because in Indiana, we still practice work lecture in lodge. Mm. That's one of our lectures we give during that. The question and answer is what you want to call it. And a lot of guys, they learned it, so they want to be able to do it in lodge. So if a young guy shows up, he's a brand new Master Mason, hey, can I do the Enterprise work lecture? Dang right you can. I said, I want to see you do it, or if a guy shows up saying, hey, I've been working on the second lecture on the EA degree for a month, you care if I do it? Yeah, you're doing it. Plain and simple. No one else, I'm not even going to ask anybody else. You're just doing it.
Right.
If a guy's working, he's going to keep working.
Yeah, and you can't discourage someone when you're trying to, build, train your replacements, right? You're trying to build a lot that has people that can do stuff. If you nip that in the bud and say, nah, actually, so-and-so loves doing it, and they've been doing it for 10 years, and you're like, well, they've been doing it for 10 years, and when they stop, no one is going to be able to do it because you have not given anyone the chance. And so it's there's so many degrees going on, you'll have an opportunity to do it again. Just step aside and let someone else do it, because that rewards their desire to learn parts, and then they'll learn more parts for you, right? And so, like, yeah, of course, they should do it.
I've been to some lodges where they don't let the visitors do any work, and they don't get any visitors.
Yeah.
When you show up to the lodge thinking you're going to help out. Oh, no, our officers do all the work. It's like, okay, then I'm not coming back here again.
Yeah, and I mean,
I hate to be that rude about it, but it's how it is sometimes.
the difference in our area is like, that doesn't happen very often. So when our visitors are coming, they're either there to watch work or enjoy fellowship and a meal or whatever we got going on, or pints afterwards.
Right.
Well, like a lot of times, like for me, I try to travel to another lodge to watch a degree because I never get to just sit on the sidelines and watch a degree. And then 95% of the time that I show up to that other lodge not thinking I'm going to have a job, I end up with a job anyways.
Yeah, when I first joined Masonry, we had an old past master, Don Nesbitt, God rest his soul. He wasn't my mentor or anything, but he kind of took over as my mentor after I became Master Mason. That before he would show up to the lodge, he would call me the day before, hey, are you going to so-and-so lodge tomorrow night? Yeah, I put on being there. Okay, I'll see you there. Well, as soon as I walk through the door, hey, there's the guy doing the Senior Deacons part tonight, or hey, there's the guy doing the work with that shirt. I'm like, what? Huh? It's like, I don't know how to do Senior Deacon on the fellowcraft degree. Oh, you'll figure it out. But him doing that pushed me to learn quickly and to do it right. If I had any questions, ask questions right away. And, it made me better, even though it aggravated the living hell out of me. It made me so much better. Because one night before I became master, I had mentioned I've been working on the inner press groups in the East. Just mentioned it. Didn't tell me I had it down or anything. And I show up to, I think it was Pickard Lodge. Pickard New London, I forget. And their master couldn't be there that night. So the junior warden, who wasn't quite ready to do it yet, comes to me and goes, hey, Don said you can sit in the East tonight. I go, do what? So I'm up there, and I am just scrambling every thought in my head that was, okay, what's next? What's next? What's next? What's next? Yeah, I guess I did a pretty good job. Everybody congratulated me. I think I did awful, but everyone said I did a great job. But it was one of the scariest moments I've ever had in lodge.
Right. We're all our own biggest critics, right? You know, I've had that before too, where I've conferred a degree and everybody's like, "Congratulations, great job," and I'm just sitting there going, "There are so many things I screwed up."
It's a fun story, Todd. In a similar situation with the hijinks of traveling to help and then something weird happening. I had one time where I went to help a lodge do a position in the third section of the degree. And they told me the part, and they said, can you do second craftsman? And I thought that was third base. So I mixed up the parts.
Oh.
You mean you thought it was second base?
Yeah, I forget what it was. So then my buddy said, oh, no, you're not doing that. I'm doing that part. And I went, oh, they guess they don't need me. So I showed up, and they go, cool, are you ready to do second craftsman? And I went, what? And I didn't know the part at all. And it was so embarrassing and horrifying. I ended up it was bad. And I felt so embarrassed. And I was like, never again am I not going to be prepared.
We've all been there before.
It was horrible. So I don't really know that much about Indiana Masonry. While we're talking about pride, what kind of pride do you have in your Grand Lodge and what you guys are doing in your state?
Right now, we got a bunch of great guys in Grand Line. Our current Grand Master Dave Morgan is local here to southern Indiana. He lives in a little town called Santa Claus, believe it or not, down here about 20 minutes south of where I'm at right now. And if you ever heard of Holiday World Splash Safari, you may have seen signs on it, seen the commercials for it, but it was the first theme park in America, basically.
Okay.
Been around since the early 50s. Well, that's the claim to fame to Santa Claus. The town was called Santa Claus. The theme park was called Santa Claus Land for a long time, and then they changed to Holiday World. But he's a local master. He's our season premiere this year on our podcast, Dave Morgan, and he's been a great grandmaster. He's most people are scared of the Grand Line sometimes, and I don't know why. I've never been scared of the Grand Line because I figure they get as many votes as I get at Grand Lodge. Way I look at it.
Brother's a brother.
Right.
Right. I've never been scared to talk to him. I've never been scared to make fun of him. I've never been scared to give him a hard time because I usually do. I mean, our Grand Line guys, I give them all a hard time no matter what.
Oh, here's Todd coming over. Uh-oh.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And we've had most of them on our show, too. We had Dave Morgan. We've had Cole Pathgrave's on there. Roger Vangor has been on there, and John Bridegroom, who's our current senior Grand Warden, I believe. Yeah, he's senior Grand Warden. But these guys. Dave's a fairly elder man, but he understands that Masonry needs to evolve as far as technology, get into the technology stuff like that. And then Randy Seipel, our deputy grandmaster, who's frequents our lodge. It's 2.5 hours from his house. I bet he comes down here 4 or 5 times a year. Mm-hmm. I mean, he travels down there to come visit our lodge quite a bit, and we appreciate that. And John Bridegroom, I think he's in his early 40s, and he's very active Freemason. I remember when he first joined Freemasonry, he was putting out all these. He's a graphic artist by trade. That's his job as a graphic artist, and he started putting out all these really cool square compasses, past matters, and emblems, not just the traditional ones. He put all that stuff on Facebook as far as showing all that stuff off. And he brought a whole new vision of what Freemason would look like, I think.
So helpful to have a graphic design guy in the Grand Lodge.
Right.
Yeah, right. So helpful.
Yeah. Yep. Actually, John Bridegroom's the one who designed our new logo we have for our podcast.
That's cool.
We had him on the show, and after we got done, we asked him, hey, any way you could design a new logo for it? Because the one we had before, Jared just made it in print, I think on Paint or something. Microsoft Paint, and that's good enough for us. So we're not special.
Right.
We're that other one.
I mean, and even the first time I watched you through the episodes, you guys had your whole cartoon logo and everything, and you had your intro and everything down, and we had none of that when we started. It was just welcome to the Other Masonic Podcast. That was it. We didn't even tell anybody we were affiliated with the Grand Lodge.
Well, we were
didn't even do that.
Very blessed when it came to our intro because we have somebody that does voice work that we knew well, who's also a brother, and we immediately were just like, we need somebody better than us to record our intro.
and it helped that I have the skill set to do graphic design. So not that I do it by trade, I just self-taught because I was the social media guy for the lodge. Right. I just learned it on the fly. So I could make that stuff. And since I like to learn stuff, I could learn how to use the sound system to put music and stuff behind the voice. So it was just nice having that on the get-go that I'm like, I can figure it out. I'll do my best. and
what we have now, Jared works for a radio station here in Jasper, Indiana. It's a TV and a radio station, little small market stuff. But one of his guys comes there and pulls him into the recording studio and goes, what do you want me to say? He goes, huh? He goes, for your podcast. So he kind of wrote out a little script for it and everything. And the guy did a professional intro for us and did a professional outro for us. So I go, hell, we're big dogs now, buddy. Hell, we got an intro and outro.
Yeah.
We're doing something special now. But, it's just, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
You're playing Jared and interrupting him.
I am playing a little bit of Jared, but there's also a slight delay. There's a slight delay that I'm not used to, because I'm used to having somebody here, so it's taking me a second. But, I mean, obviously you guys have had a very successful podcast from the get. So, I mean, as far as that logo goes or having an introduction or, a professional intro or outro or anything like that, that almost doesn't seem to make a difference. People are there for your content and you guys do an excellent job.
Well, I think the thing that helped us out, get over chest right now, but what helped us out the most is the first year we were recording, we were probably in 2-3 months. And our Founders Day celebration is coming up. And I told Jared that we need to go do a podcast at Founders Day up in the little mezzanine at Skytrack Cathedral where usually everyone hangs out. You have the York right on our table, the Masonic home, and the Rainbows and Demons all have a table out there for information. I said, I'm going to contact Grand Lodge and see if they'll allow us to come up there and do a podcast in the mezzanine. Just talk to brothers that walk by or talk to the Demon Lady, talk to the Rainbows or the Job's Daughters, stuff like that. He's like, they're not going to let us go up there and podcast. Two fat rednecks from Southern Indiana. They're not going to let us go there and podcast. How can they keep us out? We're brothers,
Yep.
And so I contacted the Grand Secretary. He sent me a form to fill out. And then he called me and goes, what are you guys against? And, well, we're a new Masonic podcast here in Indiana. I think we're the only one in Indiana right now. I said, we got to come there. We're going to talk to some of the brothers. We're going to attend Founders Day and kind of talk to all the other independent bodies here. Man, just have a good episode about Founders Day. He goes, well, we got to talk to Deputy Grandmaster about it. And they him hauling around. And finally, somehow I got the Deputy Grandmaster's phone number, and I called him every day for 2 weeks. And he goes, well, let me listen to your podcast and see if it's right for what we need it for. And I'm like, okay, I guess. So he called me back about 3 days later. Yeah, you guys come on up. You seem like all right guys. I'm like, thanks.
Thanks, brother.
Yeah. And we get up there, and people are walking by. We're talking, but it's very opening. People are just kind of walking around. They always got sell jewelry and license plates and shirts. We call it the merch area over there. So everybody kind of had to walk by us to get to the merch area. And the people who knew what podcast was, hey, where can we find your podcast? And we had to tell them we didn't have anything to say click on or take a picture of or anything like that. Yeah, we're on Spotify podcast, all this stuff like that. And then we had to teach the old guys how to find our podcast on their phone.
Mm-hmm.
I bet you I showed 25, 30 guys who on their iPhones or iPhone 5s or whatever, how to find Spotify, how to find Amazon Music, how to do all. I was even downloading apps for them so you can get the podcast and everything. But that first year doing that, we were able to talk to so many people and kind of meet so many people that the word got out. We had this podcast, and then we sat down with DeMalay's state master counselor and the head of Job's daughter, head of Rainbows, and then that right there got us a lot of publicity talking to youth groups.
Yeah,
because they don't get a whole lot of publicity like that. And just that little bit we talked to them, they put our podcast on their main Facebook page. All three of them did, and that got us a lot of views there, a lot of publicity for us. So it helped out tremendously. And doing stuff like that, I think going to the Founders Days and going to the Grand Lodge and doing a podcast there and everything, it helps out so much. Just so guys can see your face.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
I have to come clean about something. So I definitely stole that idea from listening to your podcast to do it at Grand Lodge, where you guys did your Grand Lodge episode, and I went, oh, that's a good idea. And I was like, we're going to do that.
I think, to be fair, we both stole it.
Yeah, I know. We were like, that's a good idea. And it makes sense because what was fun about listening to that episode was just that you have so much ability to talk to so many interesting people so quickly, right? And I was like, I want to talk to all these people. So yeah, we set up a booth too, like right in the rotunda where there would be like info booths, right? There'd be info booths for youth groups, dependent bodies, whatever.
The
Everything's
main
in there.
Traffic area.
Yeah, where like that's where people come out of the meeting and like congregate and hang. And we set up a little booth in the corner. You can see our little setup on our Facebook page on our banner. And and that was the same thing for us. We're like, it was fun showing the senior members who might have never even got into podcasting, and those guys love radio. And so it's like a natural transition. Like, you would like this. And it's fun that now that they're like, okay, well, someone can show me how to do it, then I can actually enjoy Masonic content in a way that they probably never thought they could. And I think that's cool. I was just showing someone the other day at Lodge how to do it. He's like, Andrew, I need you. You need to show me how to get this podcast of yours. And I was like, okay, I can help you.
And there was, I know another thing. I heard we're just friends with that Refreshment Boys up by Chicago and everything. Oh, Marty, the one thing he said on there that stuck out to me and hit me right in the head when he resaid it is the worst thing Freemasonry did as far as technology goes is not be the first one out there telling our story.
Mm-hmm.
Telling everybody what Freemasonry is. Facebook, MySpace, whatever, having Twitter, X, whatever. We should have been on that before anyone could have put a conspiracy theory out there. Telling everybody what Freemasonry is, here's what we do. And that's one of the biggest mistakes we've ever made is the old guard kind of didn't understand it, so they didn't even look at it as a possible way to recruitment or just as a way to get people out there to understand what we were.
Yep. And
when he said that, I'm like, holy crap, Marty, you're the dumb as you are sometimes, you're a genius.
Well, and it sucks because it put us years behind. And so, our current Grandmaster and the one before that was kind of talking about, it's like, we need to start building this stuff so that when you Google this, our stuff comes up first, because we're so far behind that the ones that have the better algorithm and stuff are the ones that lead towards conspiracy theories and other stupid stuff. And so it's like, it's going to take some years for that to kind of build. And I think us making content like this is just another, thing like that where someone can go, what is this? And just listen and be like, oh, these are just guys. And you're like, yeah, we're just guys. Right. We're just dudes.
Just dudes being bros.
Well, luckily here in Indiana, we had a Grand Lodge marketing guy, Stevens, something, I can't remember his last name, but I've talked to him several times. He's a really nice guy. And he put together, somehow, if you're inside the borders of Indiana and you Google Freemasonry, our Grand Lodge is the first thing that always pops up.
Nice.
Geo-tracking has something to do with it. I'm not sure about I'm not not an aficionado in it at all, but they were talking about that. If you're within the borders of Indiana and you type in anything about Freemasonry, the Grand Lodge of Indiana is the first thing that pops up on your Google search.
Nice.
I wonder if that's something we should mention to our social media guy if he doesn't know about it. He might already know about it, though, to be honest.
He might.
They might already know about it, yeah. But I mean, we had a great Grand Lodge website and everything, but like tryfreemason.com, being Mason, Try Freemasonry, and Indiana Freemasonry all go to the same website, I think. If I remember that right. But
right.
If you just type in what is Freemasonry and you're inside the state of Indiana, our Grand Lodge pops up the first thing on your Google search.
That's awesome.
And to me, I think that is the best way to introduce somebody to us. That way they don't go to anti-Freemason websites.
Right. Or a Clandy.
Yeah. Or a clandestine website, yeah.
So I'm just looking at the time now, and so I have one more question for you before we have to wrap here. And I'm going to try to say it correctly. So you've been a past master 4 times. What would be your advice you would give as a past master to someone who is going to be ascending to the Oriental chair?
Make a plan. Have a plan for the entire year. If you have an idea you want to do a fundraiser this many times a year, put it on a calendar and stick with that date. If you can't stick with that date, stick as close as you can with that date, because other things come up. But have a plan for what you want to do that year. If you don't have a whole lot of degree work, have a plan for your lodge to travel to a lot of degree work. If you're a lodge that does a lot of fundraising, make a plan, have those fundraisers set up a year in advance. That way everybody knows, okay, here's what we're going to do this year. Here's how things are going to help us. But have that plan. Don't so much worry about learning the ritual right now. You can learn the ritual anytime. But have a plan on what that lodge you're going to do for that year and your needs. Because if you don't have a plan, you're going to be flying by the seat of your pants and you're not going to know what to do. And everybody's going to be asking you what you want to do, and it's going to be confusion. But if you have a plan your first meeting, you set up this plan with all the dates and everything, and here's how we're going to pay for it, here's how much everything's going to cost, then everyone's going to follow you that way. But if you don't have a plan, you're going to be just run through the woods till you hit a tree, basically.
It makes sense to me.
Right on.
I need to finish my calendar.
You do.
Luckily, we have so many.
That's stuff I didn't do. I didn't do that stuff that a lot of folks would do at East. I didn't learn about that until I was monarch in my grotto. Those guys, they were well established. They were well funded. They knew how to do all that stuff. They told me when I got elected, he said, get your calendar set now. So we'll give you kind of when everything kind of happens, but you pick the dates, you tell everybody when it's going to be, and they will be there. I'm like, holy crap. And I did it, and I had a great year as being monarch of the grotto, all because of that. I wish I had known that 4 years previously.
Yeah, I think,
I learned it, but
that's one thing that, what's nice with our lodge is that we have so many annual events that a lot of it is just getting the stuff set up, which is helpful. But yeah, I need to go through them and get it all lined up. But I've been looking at it. I mean, the current master's been on my case about it anyway, so.
Yeah, well, the junior past master is going to start getting on your case about it now.
Yeah, I can do it like this weekend. But awesome. Well.
The biggest thing, yeah.
Oh, so, yeah, you go first. You had something to say. I'm not going to Jared you.
Well, I mean, I'm always, kidding. I wish Jared had been on here, because I think Jared would have been a whole lot more interested in me sometimes. But you guys can have him on some other time, I bet. But,
yeah, we'll get him back on. I felt bad that he couldn't get the tech working.
We'll get it figured out probably next day to meet. I'll help him get into it and everything. But the biggest thing is, Freemason's for me is going to be around until forever, until we turn into the Moose or the Elf or something like that, which I hope to God we don't. But here's a question I want to ask you guys before we go here. It's a question I brought up here a while back on TikTok. No one gave me a good enough answer. But let's say back in the, say the 60s, 70s, 80s, if all the guys who did join back in, like the hippies and the yuppies and the boomers and all that, would have joined Freemasonry back in the day, how would Freemasonry be different now?
Ooh.
Does that make any sense?
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. Like kind of that lost generation, especially with like Gen X, where we because it was the generation prior to Gen X that didn't really talk about Freemasonry. It wasn't open about it. And then Gen X kind of got lost in the mix, and they weren't really joiners anyways. And I mean, I'm on the tail end of Gen X. I'm one of those Zennials. I could be both, right? And
I was born 78, so I'm right there. Yeah.
Yeah. There's that like 78 to 83 window where they're not sure what we are.
Right. Yeah.
That is a good question.
I think that if that generation had embraced Masonry more, we would have been a little bit more modernized now than we are. I think that they would have helped, especially with how vocal that generation was on like trying to be, looking forward, doing stuff. I think that Masonry would have been, I think when you skip a generation, it's always like really detrimental to a fraternity because it creates such a wide age gap that it makes it intimidating for the generation that follows the skipped one to join because there's such a wide gap that it can also, you lose your bridge. Whereas like those guys who are sitting in the middle between the really seasoned members and the really new ones, those are often the bridge between the two because they can kind of help put their feet in both worlds a little bit more. And when that gap is so large, it causes there to be a lot more challenges to overcome as far as getting alignment on strategies and looking forward and trying to take the craft into the 21st century. So I think that lost generation was tough for us.
Well, and I think we're starting, at least in our lodge, we're starting to see more younger members come in now, which is, I think, nice because, some of us that weren't intimidated by the fact that, we were walking into a lodge where a lot of people were like 20 years older than us or something like that, 20, 25 years older than us, and just went for it anyways. Now we are that bridge for the next group, and
makes it easier.
We're able to kind of usher that next group along. So as long as we don't skip a generation again, I think we'll be good.
Yeah, I tell people online all the time, I go, if you're joining a lodge and you're the first young person, understand that when there's one young person, it makes it easier for there to be two. And I go, and when there's two, it makes it a heck of a lot easier to have three. Yeah. And then at that point, the snowball's rolling, right? And yeah, I think that, it was a weird time for those hippies, yuppies, and whatever we named them. They're having a weird time, and there's a lot going on in the world, and so, yeah, it's sad that we lost that generation. And they didn't lose it, we just didn't get as much activity. There's still some.
Right. Excellent.
Some of them did. A lot of them didn't.
Cool. Well, Todd, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah,
it was
really
fun.
Appreciate
I love
you
getting
being
Masons on from other states. It's always a good time. And other podcasters on.
And other podcasts.
Yep.
Love having other podcasters on.
And to our listeners, if you're interested in checking out That Other Masonic Podcast, you can find them anywhere you listen to podcasts. They're on social media as well. Todd does some stuff on TikTok.
We also have a podcast TikTok page also. I'm not really active on that too much, but
yeah, so you guys
don't mind.
Check them out wherever you can find them. They're fun guys. I listen to their podcast as well. It's a good time. And if you need anything from us, you can email us at
timeforfellowship@gmail.com. And Todd, your guys' new season of That Other Masonic Podcast is coming out when in April? You're starting up again?
Yeah, we should be starting up at the end of March, 1st of April. We should have our first episode out around the first week of April.
Okay.
But now we haven't recorded anything. We kind of took a hiatus because we were so busy there for so long. And the winter down here was awful for us. We couldn't get together a whole lot because the roads were so bad. But this is probably the worst winter I've spent down here forever. But gotcha. I know you guys have much worse winters than we do, so I'm not going to complain that much.
We had a pretty mild one.
It's like our third snow.
If we have 3 a year, that's a lot for us down here. But they even cancel work for a couple days for us, which never happens. But yeah, you can catch us on all social medias. That if you guys ever get a chance, come on down and see us, and we'll be glad to have you.
Heck yeah.
Awesome. Great talking to you, Todd. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Take care, everybody.
Have a great day.